Buckle up, buttercups, because we're diving headfirst into the messy, complicated, and frankly terrifying world of international trade. Specifically, we're talking about tariffs, those little economic grenades that governments lob at each other when they want to play hardball, and nobody but throws them quite like the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Now, before we get too deep into the weeds, let's take a step back and talk about tariffs. What are they exactly? In the simplest terms, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. Now, to understand why Trump went after China so aggressively, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, China's economic rise. Over the past few decades, China has transformed itself from a poor, agrarian society into a global economic powerhouse. Remember that time you went to the grocery store and your jaw hit the floor because a gallon of milk suddenly cost twice as much? No, well, that's the joy of tariffs, folks. They have a sneaky way of showing up in the most unexpected places, like the price tag of your favorite cereal or that new TV you've been eyeing. Remember that feeling of walking into your favorite store, ready to stock up on your go-to products only to find empty shelves staring back at you? Yeah, that's the fun of disrupted supply chains, another delightful side effect of Trump's trade war. See, those tariffs didn't just make things more expensive, they also messed with the delicate dance of global trade. Now, you might be thinking, sure, tariffs might hurt the little guy, but what about those big, powerful corporations? They can surely weather the storm, right? Well, not so fast. Even the giants of industry felt the sting of Trump's trade war. Now let's talk about soybeans. Not exactly the sexiest topic, I know, but trust me on this one. Soybeans are a big deal, especially for American farmers. Remember those stomach-churning drops on roller coasters, the ones that make you question every life choice that led you to that moment? Well, that's what the stock market felt like during the Trump tariff tango. One minute you're soaring to new heights, fueled by promises of economic growth and deregulation. Now, let's talk about something a little less tangible than stock prices, but just as important, consumer confidence. See, the economy isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about people. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so the US economy is taking a beating. But what about the rest of the world? They're probably doing just fine, right? Well, here's the thing about the global economy. It's like a giant game of Jenga. Section 4, the BRICS are back a new world order. While the US played tariff roulette, the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa were quietly strengthening their ties. They forged new trade agreements, reducing reliance on the US dollar. Trump's tariffs accelerated this trend. The BRICS saw an opportunity to challenge the established economic order. Whether this new world order is good or bad remains to be seen. But Trump's tariffs might have set a seismic shift in motion, and that, my friends, is something worth losing sleep over. Section 1. Collateral damage. When tariffs go global, remember that game of Jenga we talked about earlier? The one where pulling out one block can bring the whole tower crashing down? Well, Trump's tariffs weren't just yanking at blocks in the American tower. They were sending tremors through the entire global economy. It's like that time your neighbor decided to practice their opera singing at 3 a.m. Sure, they were the ones making the noise, but everyone within a 5-mile radius felt the pain. See, in our interconnected world, when the US sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And with Trump's tariffs, the US wasn't just sneezing, it was having a full-blown allergic reaction to global trade. Countries that relied on exporting goods to the US suddenly found themselves facing a very unwelcome dilemma: raise prices and risk losing market share, or eat the cost of the tariffs and watch their profits dwindle like ice cream on a hot summer day. Take Vietnam, for example. They've become a manufacturing powerhouse in recent years, churning out everything from sneakers to smartphones, but a big chunk of their economy relies on exporting those goods to, you guessed it, the US. When those tariffs hit, Vietnamese businesses were left scrambling to find new markets for their products, all while facing increased scrutiny and pressure to prove they weren't helping Chinese companies circumvent the tariffs. Talk about being caught in the crossfire. And it wasn't just developing countries feeling the heat. European nations, long considered bastions of economic stability, found themselves grappling with the fallout from Trump's trade war. Germany, with its export-driven economy heavily reliant on the automotive industry, saw its growth forecasts slashed as tariffs on steel and aluminum, key components in car manufacturing, took their toll. Section 1. Collateral damage. When tariffs go global, remember that game of Jenga we talked about earlier? The one where pulling out one block can bring the whole tower crashing down? Well, Trump's tariffs weren't just yanking at blocks in the American tower. They were sending tremors through the entire global economy. It's like that time your neighbor decided to practice their opera singing at 3 a.m. Sure, they were the ones making the noise, but everyone within a 5-mile radius felt the pain. See, in our interconnected world, when the US sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And with Trump's tariffs, the US wasn't just sneezing, it was having a full-blown allergic reaction to global trade. Countries that relied on exporting goods to the US suddenly found themselves facing a very unwelcome dilemma: raise prices and risk losing market share, or eat the cost of the tariffs and watch their profits dwindle like ice cream on a hot summer day. Take Vietnam, for example. They've become a manufacturing powerhouse in recent years, churning out everything from sneakers to smartphones, but a big chunk of their economy relies on exporting those goods to, you guessed it, the US. When those tariffs hit, Vietnamese businesses were left scrambling to find new markets for their products, all while facing increased scrutiny and pressure to prove they weren't helping Chinese companies circumvent the tariffs. Talk about being caught in the crossfire. And it wasn't just developing countries feeling the heat. European nations, long considered bastions of economic stability, found themselves grappling with the fallout from Trump's trade war. Germany, with its export-driven economy heavily reliant on the automotive industry, saw its growth forecasts slashed as tariffs on steel and aluminum, key components in car manufacturing, took their toll. Section 2. From autos to electronics, global supply chains in shambles. Remember that time you ordered a pizza and it arrived 2 hours late, cold and missing half the toppings? That's what happened to global supply chains thanks to Trump's trade war, but with semiconductors and essential components. Products aren't made in just one country anymore. They're the result of a complex, interconnected web of suppliers and manufacturers. Think of it like a relay race, where each country handles a part of the process. Now imagine one runner trips and drops the baton. That's what happened with Trump's tariffs. Businesses faced delays, shortages and skyrocketing costs. Take the automotive industry, for example. A single car can have parts sourced from dozens of countries. A tariff on steel from China could disrupt production in Germany, delaying delivery to the US. It's a domino effect, and it's not pretty. And it wasn't just cars. Everything from smartphones to medical equipment relies on global supply chains. Disruptions create a ripple effect, leading to higher prices and slower economic growth. Now, you might think that facing a common enemy like Trump's tariffs would bring countries together, right? That it would foster a sense of solidarity and cooperation in the face of adversity. Well, in the immortal words of that wise philosopher Yoda, always in motion is the future, and in this case, the future was looking less like a group hug and more like a free-for-all in a mud pit. See, while Trump was busy picking trade fights with China, he also managed to alienate some of America's closest allies. Remember NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement? That decades-old agreement that governed trade between the United States, Canada, and Mexico? Well, Trump decided it was a bad deal for America and threatened to rip it up if he didn't get his way. After months of tense negotiations, the three countries eventually agreed to a revised deal, dubbed the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. But the damage was done. Trump's aggressive tactics and his willingness to throw long-standing trade relationships under the bus left a bitter taste in the mouths of America's neighbors. And it wasn't just North America feeling the strain. Trump also slapped tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from the European Union, claiming it was a matter of national security. The EU, understandably miffed at being labelled a security threat by their closest ally, retaliated with tariffs of their own, targeting iconic American products like Harley-Davidson motorcycles and bourbon whiskey. Now, in the midst of all this trade war chaos, there was one institution that was supposed to be the adult in the room, the referee in the ring, the keeper of the peace, the World Trade Organization, or WTO. Created in the aftermath of World War II, the WTO is like the United Nations of Trade, a forum where countries can come together to negotiate trade agreements, settle disputes, and generally try to prevent the world from descending into a Mad Max-style economic wasteland. But Trump, with his penchant for unilateral action and his disdain for multilateral institutions, saw the WTO as more of a nuisance than a necessity. He repeatedly criticized the organization, calling it unfair to the United States and threatening to pull out altogether. And he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. The Trump administration blocked appointments to the WTO's appellate body, the organization's highest court for resolving trade disputes, effectively paralyzing its ability to function properly. This assault on the WTO, the cornerstone of the rules-based trading system that has underpinned global prosperity for decades, sent a chilling message to the world. When it comes to trade, might makes right, and the United States is done playing by the rules. Now, whether the WTO can weather this storm and emerge stronger from this period of turmoil remains to be seen. But one thing's for sure, Trump's tariffs, those little grenades of economic nationalism, have left their mark on the global trading system, and the repercussions will be felt for years to come. Remember that sleek new smartphone you've been eyeing? The one with all the bells and whistles? Well, thanks to Trump's trade war, it might be time to start saving those pennies, because those shiny gadgets just got a whole lot pricier. See, Silicon Valley, that land of unicorns, venture capitalists, and tech bros with more money than common sense, wasn't immune to the fallout from Trump's trade war. In fact, some of the biggest names in tech found themselves caught in the crosshairs, their profits squeezed tighter than a pair of skinny jeans at a buffet. Take Apple, for example, the tech giant that's practically synonymous with sleek design and cutting-edge technology. They manufacture a huge chunk of their products, including the iconic iPhone, in China. When those tariffs hit, Apple was faced with a lose-lose situation. Raise prices and risk alienating customers, or absorb the costs and watch their profit margins shrink faster than a polar bear in a heat wave. And it wasn't just Apple feeling the heat. Samsung, the South Korean electronics giant, also faced increased costs for components and materials sourced from China. Intel, the chip-making behemoth, saw its profits dented as tariffs disrupted global supply chains and dampened demand for electronics. The message was clear: even the mighty titans of Silicon Valley weren't immune to the laws of economics, and those laws dictated that tariffs equal higher prices, reduced demand, and ultimately lower profits. Remember that feeling of scoring the perfect outfit at a fraction of the original price? Well, thanks to Trump's trade war, those bargain hunting days might be over. The entire industry is feeling the pinch of those pesky tariffs. The fashion industry, with its global supply chains, is particularly vulnerable. China is a major supplier of fabrics and garments to fashion brands. Tariffs sent shockwaves from Paris runways to Bangladesh sweatshops. Luxury brands face higher costs for imported materials. They must choose between higher prices or reduced profit margins. Fast fashion retailers also feel the squeeze. The result? Higher prices for consumers. That cute top you've been eyeing? It might cost a few extra bucks now. Those designer shoes you've been coveting? Better start saving up, and those fast fashion bargains, they might just be too good to be true now. Remember that new car smell, the feeling of freedom and excitement that comes with cruising down the open road in a shiny new set of wheels? Well, thanks to Trump's trade war, that dream might be stuck in the slow lane. Because the auto industry, that engine of economic growth, found itself sputtering under the weight of tariffs and uncertainty. See, the auto industry is a global behemoth, a complex ecosystem of manufacturers, suppliers and distributors spread across the globe. And it's an industry that relies heavily on a delicate balance of just-in-time inventory and intricate supply chains to keep those assembly lines humming and those new cars rolling off the lot. But Trump's tariffs, those little speed bumps on the road to globalization, threw a wrench into the works, disrupting production, driving up costs, and leaving the auto industry seeing red, and not the kind that looks good on a sports car. American automakers, already facing challenges from rising labor costs and increased competition from foreign rivals, found themselves caught between a rock and a hard place. Tariffs on steel and aluminum, key components in car manufacturing, increased the cost of production, while tariffs on finished vehicles from countries like China and the European Union threatened to price American-made cars out of the market. And it wasn't just American companies feeling the pain. Foreign automakers with manufacturing plants in the United States like Toyota, Honda and Hyundai also faced higher costs and disrupted supply chains, forcing them to raise prices, cut production and reconsider their investment plans. We've talked about stock market swings, disrupted supply chains, and corporate profits taking a hit. But behind those abstract economic indicators, there are real people, real families, whose lives were turned upside down by the fallout from Trump's trade war. See, the true cost of protectionism can't be measured solely in dollars and cents. It's measured in lost jobs, shuttered factories, and the shattered dreams of those caught in the crossfire. Remember those farmers we talked about earlier, the ones whose livelihoods were devastated by retaliatory tariffs on American soybeans? Many of them were forced to sell their farms, their legacies passed down through generations, wiped out by a trade war they didn't start and couldn't win. Factory workers, already struggling to stay afloat in an era of automation and globalization, found themselves laid off as companies, squeezed by tariffs and uncertainty, were forced to cut costs. Small business owners, the backbone of the American economy, saw their dreams crumble as tariffs ate into their profits and consumer spending slowed to a trickle. And it wasn't just economic hardship that these communities faced. The social fabric, already frayed by years of political polarization and economic inequality, was stretched even thinner as the trade war exacerbated existing divisions. Rural communities, already struggling with declining populations and limited opportunities, were hit particularly hard. Their plight often overlooked amidst the noise of partisan bickering and Wall Street's obsession with quarterly profits. For all the talk of winning trade wars, Trump's tariffs might have had the opposite effect. Instead of crippling China, they strengthened it. Beijing diversified trade relationships, innovated out of US dependence, and solidified its global economic position. While the US built tariff walls, China built bridges and new trade agreements. They found alternative suppliers, reducing reliance on the US and lessening the impact of tariffs. Tariffs spurred China to innovate and invest in AI and robotics, aiming to lead in future technologies. Section 2. BRICS on the rise. A new economic order takes shape, and as the United States turned inward, embracing protectionism and alienating its allies, China seized the opportunity to strengthen its ties with other emerging economies, particularly those within the BRICS bloc. Remember that acronym, folks? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries, with their vast populations, abundant resources, and growing economies, represent a formidable force on the global stage, and they're not exactly thrilled with the prospect of a world dominated by the United States and its Western allies. They see Trump's tariffs, his America First rhetoric, and his disdain for multilateralism as a sign that the United States is no longer a reliable partner, that it's more interested in throwing its weight around than in playing by the rules. So, while the United States was busy fighting trade wars and alienating its allies, the BRICS countries were quietly strengthening their ties, forging new trade agreements, creating alternative financial institutions, and generally doing everything they could to reduce their reliance on the US dollar and the Western-dominated financial system. Now, whether this new world order, this multipolar world with the BRICS countries playing a more prominent role, will be a good thing or a bad thing remains to be seen. But one thing's for sure, Trump's tariffs, those little grenades of economic nationalism, might have inadvertently accelerated this shift in the global balance of power, weakening America's influence and emboldening its rivals. Section 3. The self-inflicted wound. Unintended consequences of protectionism. Trump's tariffs aimed to protect American jobs, but might have done more harm than good. Higher prices for goods ate into household budgets and slowed economic growth. Job losses continued due to automation and trade war uncertainties. Farmers struggled with retaliatory tariffs despite subsidies adding to national debt. In the end, tariffs were a classic case of the cure being worse than the disease. Section 4. A legacy of uncertainty navigating the post-tariff landscape. The long-term consequences of Trump's trade policies are still unfolding, a complex tapestry of economic, political, and geopolitical threads. The trade war with China might have cooled, but underlying tensions remain a simmering pot of economic anxieties. The global trading system, strained by protectionism, nationalism, and the COVID-19 pandemic, faces an uncertain future. The World Trade Organization struggles to regain its footing, its authority challenged. BRICS countries, emboldened by America's inward turn, are forging new alliances and challenging the established order. The United States grapples with the consequences of its actions, its economy bruised, its alliances strained. The road ahead is fraught with uncertainty, a complex web of challenges and opportunities. The legacy of Trump's tariffs will continue to reverberate, a reminder of the interconnectedness of the global economy. Section 1. The Tariff Hangover, a sobering reality check. So there you have it, folks. The Trump tariff tsunami, a whirlwind of economic chaos, geopolitical maneuvering, and unintended consequences that left no corner of the globe untouched. We've seen how those tariffs, those little grenades of economic nationalism, rippled through the global economy, disrupting supply chains, driving up prices, and undermining consumer confidence. We've seen how they strained alliances, emboldened rivals, and ultimately might have done more harm than good to the very country they were supposed to protect. The Trump administration might have touted its trade policies as a victory for American workers and businesses, but the reality is far more nuanced, far more complex, and far more sobering. The trade war with China might be over for now, but its scars remain, a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of the global economy, the fragility of international cooperation, and the high cost of protectionism. As we navigate the choppy waters of the post-pandemic world, as we grapple with the challenges of climate change, technological disruption, and rising inequality, the lessons of the Trump tariff tsunami should serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder that in our interconnected world there are no easy answers, no quick fixes, and no winners in a trade war. The path forward, as always, lies in cooperation, in dialogue, in a recognition that our shared prosperity depends on our ability to work together, to build bridges instead of walls, and to find common ground in a world increasingly defined by division and uncertainty.